And welcome back into another episode of the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I am Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Wednesday, October 16th. Recording this at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. RJ, how you doing, man?
A little bit groggy, but
It's that
can't beat game week. You cannot beat game week.
cannot beat game weekend. So this is our second episode this week. Second episode in the last couple of days. As you all know, we did one yesterday. We did a little bit of a deep dive into the decision that broke yesterday about playing Georgia in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in 2025. We also, gave our final thoughts on the North Carolina game and gave you a very surface level preview of Notre Dame. So if you want to watch that episode before you dive into that one, I encourage you to go check it out. And before we get into the preview today, everybody knows Wednesday is preview day. Make sure, subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. We would really appreciate it. We love to see y'all's reviews and your comments, whether it's on podcast, YouTube, like wherever. Just leave us a review if you can, like that. That would help us a bunch. And we love making this content for you guys, and continue doing that. Like that would help us a lot. So thank you for the support that you've shown us. We've really grown a lot over the past couple months, and again, we love doing this for you guys. So if y'all could help us out by doing that, that would be great. But are you ready to talk Notre Dame?
Yes, sir.
Like actually talk Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
So I guess before we get into like the players and the stats and everything, like I guess just kind of up to this point, what has Notre Dame done this season? They came in to the year ranked in the top 10. They were expected to make the college football playoff. You can't talk about Notre Dame without talking about their injuries either. Like this is unfortunately one of the most beat up teams in the country. And I think when they're fully healthy, they are more than capable of making the college football playoff. I still think they're capable of making the college football playoff. But the injuries are going to make it tougher. And, the latest one being star cornerback Benjamin Morrison. It was announced by head coach Marcus Freeman that he would be out for the season with hip surgery. And that is not a small injury. He is a first-round cornerback. He is arguably the number one cornerback in the entire country. You could go look at any mock drafts, way too early mock drafts for next April. They will almost definitely have him in there. Like he is a very, very good player. They lost their top pass rusher earlier in the year. They dealt with some injuries on the offensive line. So this is a team that's a little bit beat up, but they are still very good. Like, let me reiterate that. They are beat up, but they are still very talented. Marcus Freeman recruits at a really high level. They are very well coached. Like, I would argue I'd have to, again, this is just off the top of my head, but having Mike Denbrock as offensive coordinator, remember, he was the offensive coordinator at LSU last year when Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. Also was the offensive coordinator at Cincinnati when they went to the college football playoff. Him and Al Golden are one of the top two coordinator pairings in the entire country. Like that, they are fantastic. I know most of you maybe remember Al Golden from being the head coach at Miami. He went after he was fired in 2015, he was in the NFL for a little bit, and like he is a very respected defensive coach. Like he has kind of emerged as one of if not the top defensive coordinator in all of college football. I don't know that I'd put him number one, but he is definitely in the conversation for that. And I asked Brent Key about it Tuesday, about him and the defense, and just he talked about how formidable they were and how well coached they were. So I just wanted to kind of point any of that out. Any thoughts there, or you want me to continue?
Well, I just wanted to say the big thing is injuries. Like obviously Benjamin Morrison, Trey Orr on the defensive line, Christian Gray in the secondary. There's so many injuries on this team, which I think gives Georgia Tech an opportunity. But this Notre Dame team is still going to be ready. They're 12 ranked they're 12 ranked in the nation for a reason.
That's the thing. And like they have several guys in the secondary they're going to have to count to step up. Like Christian Gray for them has to step up. Jordan Clark is one of the best nickels in the entire country. He'll have to take a role. Leonard Moore is a true freshman. He'll have to definitely play a lot. And we'll get into that when we talk about Notre Dame's defense. But just wanted to talk about the injuries and the coordinators. And I wanted to kind of talk about their season up to this point to kind of give a little bit of perspective. They are 5-1. They're ranked number 12 in the country. They have one of the best wins in the country, and it's kind of only looked better in hindsight. They had a big primetime game in week 1. They went down to College Station and beat Texas A&M. Now, coming out of that game, I know there was some, is Texas A&M any good thoughts out there. they've not lost a game since, and they look really good. They're a ranked team, and Notre Dame's defense put on a fantastic performance in that game. I encourage anybody, any Georgia Tech fan out there that's getting ready for this game, go watch that game, and you can really appreciate how good Notre Dame is on defense. Then, of course, the next week is the game I think a lot of people know about. They were 29-point favorites against Northern Illinois, and they lost that game. I would say that or the Vanderbilt over Alabama is definitely the biggest upset of the season. But since then, they beat Purdue 66-7. Miami, Ohio, they beat 28-3. They beat Louisville 31-24. The one common opponent so far this season that they have, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame have. Like Notre Dame does play Florida State later in the year, but it's a little bit of a different Florida State team with that DJU. And then they played Stanford last week, and like Stanford is just very overmatched right now. Like they're still a work in progress, and Notre Dame just beat them down last week. Like it was 49-7. And now they come down to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for a game. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, like because of the Northern Illinois loss and because Notre Dame does not have a super strong schedule. And some of that is no fault of their own. Like I think they're hurt a little bit by Florida State not being very good. USC is 3-3 now. Like they have some teams on there not living up to their preseason hype, and that hurts their schedule a little bit. But this is a team still hoping to make the college football playoff. But they also, I don't think they can afford another loss because right now, other than Texas A&M, I don't know that they have like a playoff-worthy win. And like this would help because I think Georgia Tech they're 5-2. I think they're going to finish with a winning record and get to bowl eligibility. But it's a big game for Georgia Tech, but it's also a big game for Notre Dame. And I think you got to factor that in when talking about it. Like they have to win this game to stay alive in the playoff conversation. Any thoughts on any of that stuff, their season or how they've looked up to this point before we dive into the personnel?
Well, the one thing I will say is they do play some teams that could make it into the playoff. Like obviously, I think Army and Navy both can slide into that group of 5 playoff spot, which is crazy to say.
I'm not smiling. I'm not like smiling because Army or Navy are bad. Like I think they're really good. And that is like all due respect to Boise State and Ashton Jeanty. I'm rooting for either Army or Navy to get that group of 5 spot. So just wanted my opinion to be out there.
But yeah, Army and Navy, I think they could both spoil Notre Dame's season heading into the playoffs. USC too, I think is a really good team.
Yeah, like they still have tough challenges. It's just, I mean, USC was ranked in the top 10 just a few weeks ago, and then lost to Michigan, lost to Penn State, lost to Minnesota. Florida State is obviously a terrible team, so that's hurting a little bit. And then they also play Army, Navy, and Virginia. So, just long story short, Notre Dame is still trying to make the college football playoff. Georgia Tech could clinch bowl eligibility, and this would be a monster win for them. Like beating a top 15 team would just do wonders. And we talked about it yesterday. Like we're not super concerned with this all the time, but if you win this game, you're probably ranked. I would assume. I don't know how you wouldn't be at 6-2 with a win like this, but let the results play out how they may. So I guess let's start with Notre Dame's offense, and we mentioned it a little bit yesterday. There are some similarities between Georgia Tech and Notre Dame when it comes to their offensive identity, and that is, of course, like Notre Dame is tremendous at running the football. They are not very good at throwing the football. They're, just to read off some stats for you, just kind of get a big picture thing. They're 108th in passing offense, averaging about 184 yards per game. Riley Leonard comes in here. He has not hit 1,000 yards yet passing, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, completing 66% of his passes. Bo Collins, the Clemson transfer, he is their top receiver, 21 catches, 266 yards, and a touchdown. Jaden Greathouse is also a guy to keep your eye on, 14 catches, 159 yards, and a touchdown. They're 45th in red zone offense, which is about average. They're 50th in sacks allowed, and we'll kind of talk about it as like almost weakness on weakness. It's not like Notre Dame doesn't have one of the worst offensive lines in the country when it comes to pass blocking, but they're very average. But it's also Georgia Tech's pass rush has not been very good this season. So like who wins that battle? Like that's going to be, I think, one of the key things we talk about. But their running game is very explosive, and like they can just grind you down, man. Like there's number 16 in the country in rushing offense. Jeremiah Love is fantastic, 426 yards, nearly 7 yards a carry, 6 touchdowns. Riley Leonard, of course, he has over 400 yards rushing. He also averages 6 yards a carry, has 8 touchdowns. And then Jaden Price, 260 yards, 6.3 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns this year. They're 26th in the nation in points per game, averaging 35, and 27th in tackles for loss allowed. And I do think it is important to kind of talk a little bit about the defenses they faced here in recent weeks. Like they have scored 49 on Stanford, 66 on Purdue. When they have faced decent to formidable defenses, like Georgia Tech is not the best defense they've played this year. Like I want to make that clear. Like that's not what I'm trying to say here. When they played Texas A&M, they didn't move the ball as well. When they played Northern Illinois, they are a Group of 5 team. They have one of the best defenses in the country. Like go look at the stats. Like they're a very good defensive football team. They struggled a little bit. They didn't even get 300 yards against Louisville, who has a good front seven, but a questionable secondary. And Notre Dame didn't really do a lot there. And Louisville shot themselves in the foot several times. And then Stanford is just bad. Like they're a terrible defensive football team. So I'm kind of. What are your thoughts when you look at this Notre Dame offense? Just weaknesses, strengths, and just kind of how you think they're going to play against this defense on Saturday.
Yeah, the one thing that sticks out to me with Notre Dame is, especially on offense, they play with a very, very, very slow pace. They're not, exceptionally one of the highest scoring teams, per game, but they do average a lot of points per drive. They are 4th in the country in yards per rush with 8.1. They average 0.54 points per play, which is top 15 in the nation. They do a lot on offense that can cause you to have a slow pace, and they do a lot of plays to cause a slow pace. Especially in the Texas A&M game, we saw they don't really like to throw the ball downfield. They have I guess you would call it a deep wide receiver room because there is a lot of equal talent. There's a lot of guys that do very similar things. They run a lot of jet motion, never really pass the ball past 15 yards. But the running backs, they do like to get involved in the passing game a ton. Jeremiah Love is fast. Price can get past the second level in any scenario. But they can do a lot of things. And the one thing I will push back on you is I do think this offensive line is pretty solid in the run game. Their only defense or their only weakness really on the offensive line is Knapp at left tackle. I mean, he's a true freshman. He got bullied a lot of the Texas A&M game in pass rush. But when you're running the ball up the middle, you can kind of disguise that, and they do that pretty well, and I think that's why they run the ball at such a high clip.
Yeah, and I was more saying in pass protection. They're a bit of an average to average. Run blocking, they're phenomenal. Also, the backup running back, I said Jaden Price. It's Jadarian Price. That's my fault for mixing that up there. They got a little confused, so apologies there. But, yeah, it's kind of you look at the advanced numbers a little bit, and, shout out to the guys at College Football Insiders. They do a great job with these graphs. We kind of use them, display them every week. Man, when you look at Notre Dame's offensive success rate, 74th in the country, 39th in rushing success rate, 93rd in dropback. So, again, that just backs up what your eyes tell you. They are a very good unit when running the football. They struggle a little bit when it comes to the passing game. And, I hinted at it a little bit. I think, when looking at these two matchups, it's going to be which weakness wins out. Georgia Tech's defense, as we're going to talk about, their weakness is, of course, in the passing game. They're a pretty good run defense, but they struggle with good passing attacks. I don't know how many times we've both said it on this podcast that Georgia Tech's worst nightmare when it comes to opposing offenses is teams with a good passing attack, with a good set of weapons and a good quarterback. It didn't have to be an elite quarterback because, like, Tyler Shuck is a good quarterback. I don't think he's elite, but he also has a very good head coach and has good weapons on the outside and knows what to do with the football. Those kind of teams hurt Georgia Tech. This isn't what you're facing here. So I do think in some ways it's a good matchup for this defense. Now, Notre Dame, I think, Notre Dame's better at what they do than I think Georgia Tech is better than what they do on defense. Like I would favor Notre Dame's rushing attack here, but it's not like by a large margin at all. But again, it's how can you get your weakness to win and not allow anything? Like, can Georgia Tech prevent Notre Dame from being able to run the football and then not allow them to get any explosives through the air. Like, can Riley Leonard get 3 to 4 explosive plays through the air? Because Georgia Tech controlled the game a lot of the time against North Carolina last week, but we talked about in the first half, like, what was it? It was explosive plays. That's how North Carolina was scoring. Like, and they didn't get a lot of them, but when they did, they scored. Like J.J. Jones catching the 53-yard bomb to get down to the red zone. Amarian Hampton finished with like 130 yards, but he had like 71, 72 of them on like one carry, and they got down to the red zone and then they scored. So it's, can you prevent that from happening? And I think they can, because again, I think the Notre Dame's biggest weakness here to me is their receivers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. And the one thing that I would like to mention, I think Notre Dame is better than anything at Florida State, but this matchup is also kind of similar to the Florida State game, where you have a run-heavy offense, a quarterback that at the time we thought was fairly talented, could do some things with the ball, and rushers that, you know, can do pretty much anything. And I think that's what Notre Dame has. I think Notre Dame is what Florida State was expected to be.
Yes, yeah. That is exactly. I was going to go there as well. Like, Notre Dame is what we thought Florida State was going to be this year. Like, Riley Leonard is, for all his, you know, deficiencies, I guess is maybe the right word. Like, for all his shortcomings, he is 100 times better than DJU. Like, this rushing attack is 1,000 times better than what Florida State has. Like, I don't even think 1,000 times is probably the right description for it. Like, 1,000,000 times is probably the more accurate description of it. But yeah, that I think that's exactly right. Like, it's stylistically, and that's one of the reasons we both picked Georgia Tech to beat Florida State. We thought they matched up well enough, and we thought they had improved enough as a defense where they weren't going to hurt them. I think Notre Dame's going to have to find some ways to get some explosive passing yards in this game. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot. Like, I don't know that you can ask Riley Leonard to throw for 300 yards. But like, he's going to have to find some success somewhere, because again, when you are a run heavy team and you're playing a good rush defense, like Georgia Tech's going to crowd the box, I would imagine, and try to say, okay, we don't think your receivers can beat us. Maybe we don't have elite first round cornerbacks, but we don't think your receivers are going to beat them. It's, can Riley Leonard make the play? You know?
Yeah, and I think that's what we saw in the Texas A&M game, where Texas A&M tried to force Notre Dame to throw the ball. They got some explosive plays. Like, they had, I think, 2 plays over 20 yards. Again, that's not a lot. It was good enough to facilitate some drives, and that's how they won that game. So I think the key for Notre Dame, if they want to win, exactly like you said, have some explosive plays. But by explosive, I don't mean 60-yard pass down the sideline, Riley Leonard. It could just be a 20-yard pass to get you, 3rd and 17 gain, get into Georgia Tech territory. I just think they're going to need something like that, especially with how Georgia Tech is going to attack on offense.
Yep. And I guess let's shift it over to the Georgia Tech defense a little bit. And, here, just some stats. They're actually 28th in third down defense. Going into it when I was, kind of reviewing things today, just because they ranked so low in a lot of passing defense statistics, I actually thought they'd be lower on defense, but they are a top 30 unit when it comes to third down defense. 110th in turnovers created. We talk about that a lot. They did create some last week, but it's been an issue all season. 82nd in passing yards allowed. They are 23rd in the nation in rushing defense, 41st in scoring defense, 114th in sacks, 71st in tackles for loss, 105th in passing efficiency allowed, and 36th in total defense. So it's nothing has changed. I know North Carolina got some explosive runs, but as a whole, I think Georgia Tech did fairly well to keep them bottled up. And as good as Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are, they're not as good as Amarian Hampton. I will say that. But they're 2 very good running backs, and I think the front 7. I think it's going to have to. Is that the most important unit in the whole game for Georgia Tech? The front 7.
It has to be, because we've seen Notre Dame throughout the year offensively, their offensive line, they get to the next level really quick, especially on the interior. If Georgia Tech gets bullied, up front, it's not going to be pretty. And we haven't really seen teams run the ball against Georgia Tech a lot. I talked about this last week. Georgia Tech moved up even after playing North Carolina. Teams only average 27 rushes a game. Like, there are 5 other teams in the nation They get ran on less. Everybody below that, it's Georgia Tech. Teams only run the ball 45% of the time. And I'd beg to say we're going to see a lot more out of Notre Dame. They're going to run the ball. They're going to try to run the ball down, in between the tackles where it's been iffy some parts of the season. Some parts of the season they've been really good. Jeremiah Love, again, if he has space, it's really solid. But that's a spot matchup wise where it really could go either way. I think Georgia Tech could find a way to push back on the offensive line a little bit.
Yep, and I want to mention one interesting wrinkle in this game. I don't always buy into this stuff, but I think it's worth mentioning that, of course, most people know that Riley Leonard did play for Duke last year, and Tyler Santucci and Jess Simpson were both at Duke last year. Again, I don't really think it means much, but I think it's worth pointing out. And I think somebody asked Brent Key yesterday about, hey, Tyler Santucci, he faced Notre Dame last year, but Mike Denbrock was not the offensive coordinator. This is a different offense, so you're not scheming, you're not game planning for the same scheme. But yeah, I just wanted to throw in there that Santucci and Simpson are plenty familiar with Leonard. Do with that information what you will. I don't always put a ton of stock into it, but who knows? It could end up making a difference possibly. But what would you say is the number of rushing yards that Georgia Tech has to hold Notre Dame to win this game?
I don't know because we've seen Notre Dame run for a decent amount of yards and have a close game like the one against Texas A&M. They had 198 in that game. I would say you can't let them reach 200 yards. Getting close to that number, I think Tech could still win.
Yeah, because you're going to see, I think, a high volume.
Yeah,
in this game. Like I really do. And you can even see, like, we talk about it a lot. Winning early downs is just going to be very important in this game. Like, you can look at the matchup right here. Like, early downs EPA, like Notre Dame is pretty solid. They're 41st in early downs EPA. Third and fourth down success rate, they're 107th in the country on offense. Now, Georgia Tech is 83rd. So again, you're talking about weakness on weakness. Who wins there? Like, who can get the stops on third and fourth down if need be? I think for Georgia Tech, it's going to be, forcing third and longs. Like, I know the passing defense is the weak spot, but Notre Dame is a very good rushing team, and they're going to thrive on third and fourth and short, I think. No matter the defense. Like, I think you have to put a stop to them in early downs. But yeah, I think the front's defensive line and linebackers, the front seven is just going to be such a vital part in this game. And then, not saying the secondary is not, but I think, again, Notre Dame's weakness is in the receivers. It's going to be just not allowing them to make plays in the back end. So any other thoughts on offense versus defense, or are you ready to flip it around?
The one thing I will say, I think Georgia Tech is going to have to try to force Notre Dame to throw the ball. I know that's hard to do because how dominant they are. But maybe this could be a game where we see another Georgia Tech interception. That just really has not happened a lot on defense. Like, Georgia Tech is 132nd in the nation in interceptions per play on defense, which is it's abysmal.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think the corners are like, I don't think it's I'm not saying they're like NFL guys, but I don't think Georgia Tech secondary is without talent. I just think some things, like, go look at Warren Burrell and Amari Harvey's coverage grades. Like, they're not outstanding, but they're actually not, like, terrible. But as a whole, obviously, like, Georgia Tech's passing defense has, of course, been the weakness. Like, you can just look at the success rate numbers right here. 33rd in defensive rushing success rate allowed, 117th in drop back success rate allowed. So yeah, it's not been great against teams that can throw the ball. But the question is, can Notre Dame throw the ball enough to win the game? Like, you can't run the ball every play, I don't think. Any want to move on?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's talk a little about Notre Dame's defense, Georgia Tech's offense, and I guess we got to talk about the elephant in the room a little bit. Again, I don't want to harp on this too much. I'm just going to assume Haynes King plays until something. Brent Key says he's day to day. I'm going into the game thinking he's going to play. I don't. That's how we're going to talk about it this game, in this preview rather. I am very interested to see this rushing offense, which has been on a roll lately, going against Notre Dame's rushing defense. And I guess before I move on, like, again, if he doesn't play, we'll see Zach Pyron. we'll see how that works. He has started before. He's got a lot of experience. But I'm going to operate as if King is going to play for right now until something official is said. So we'll see. Like I think he'll play. All right. Notre Dame is not a terrible rush defense, but it's also like clearly the weak point of their defense. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say really the weak point. Granted, I like a lot of these players. I do think the linebacking core gets exposed a lot of the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think, I was watching the PFF preview, and go check that out if y'all haven't. They also do a really good job, and they were talking about how underwhelming their front four has been this year. And remember, they lost their top pass rusher this year. Like Notre Dame is a pretty good pass rushing unit. They have 16 sacks this year, but 4 of them are not going to be on the field Saturday. So I think the past couple weeks since the bye week, because we know in the 2 losses that Georgia Tech has against Syracuse and Louisville, they weren't able to run the ball. The running game was really bad against Louisville, and it wasn't great against Syracuse. Like I know Haynes King was basically the only rushing offense they had at all against Syracuse. He had a rushing touchdown early, and I think he had 2 in that game if I remember correctly. But most of the stats for Notre Dame's defense are going to look really good. They're 10th in third down defense, 20th in interceptions, 6th in passing yards allowed, 46th in rushing defense, 8th in scoring defense, 25th in sacks, like I was just saying, 87th in tackles for loss per game. I thought that was kind of interesting. 5th in defensive passing efficiency allowed, and 11th in total defense. But again, as far as the passing numbers go, they are going to be missing Benjamin Morrison. We talked about that yesterday. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. And now they've got some young guys in their secondary that are going to be playing. And I think one of the keys to this is, can Georgia Tech take advantage? Haynes King throwing the ball to either Malik Rutherford or Eric Singleton Jr. Like, can they take advantage of some of these young guys? Because, just looking at the depth chart that was released this week, like you had Aiden Schuler, he's a sophomore. Christian Gray is a sophomore. Leonard Moore is a freshman. Now, they still have probably the best nickel player in the country. I'd have to think about that for a little bit, but Jordan Clark is very, very, very good. Like he is going to be somebody to watch. I'm going to be kind of interested to see how they use him, because I know Georgia Tech's a little banged up at the tight end position, but they run a lot of 2 tight end sets and don't run as much 3 receivers. So I'm kind of interested to see how Notre Dame matches personnel with them a little bit as far as that goes. But the running game is going to have to be very, very good on Saturday. Would you not agree?
I mean, I have to agree, because even with the injuries that Notre Dame has had defensively, especially, at defensive back, they still have a plethora of guys who can make plays, even guys who have made plays throughout the seasons that don't start. Xavier Watts, obviously All-American. He is especially strong in coverage. Aiden Schuler has been really good in coverage. He got a pick, actually, against A&M. He's one of those guys where he's always right place, right time. He is always, back shoulder when the ball's thrown back shoulder. He has been insane in coverage. He plays safety, a little bit of corner in there too. But I think defensively, even with injuries, defensive back is still, I think that's still their strength. They have playmakers who make plays. The only part I don't necessarily like about their defensive back room, in outside runs or runs that attack defensive backs, Notre Dame has struggled to tackle. That's one thing I've seen a lot. So maybe that is a point where Georgia Tech, could run some outside plays. Obviously, we've seen Malik Rutherford running the ball more than anybody would have expected. We've seen short plays, screen plays. I think that could be something big to watch. I know Buster Faulkner loves screen plays, but that could be a lot more in play than people think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And looking at it, I think this is going to be the second best offense that Notre Dame has seen so far this year. I think Louisville's offense is probably a little bit better than Georgia Tech's, especially when it comes to explosive passing plays through the air. But looking at some of the other teams they play, like Texas A&M is an okay offense. I think we're still kind of finding out how good they are, because they have not exactly played a great schedule. So I think Texas A&M is kind of TBD. Northern Illinois, again, they are very good on defense. They are very bad on offense. Purdue is one of the worst teams in the Power Four. Miami, Ohio does not have a good offense, and Stanford just does not have good anything right now. So I would say that Georgia Tech is maybe not by far. I think Georgia Tech or Texas A&M is maybe the second best offense they played, with Louisville being the top spot. So I'm kind of interested to see the wrinkles they can throw in, and maybe if they can maybe expose some areas of Notre Dame's defense that haven't been exposed yet. But I think that's going to be very tough because this is the best defense that Georgia Tech has faced. Yes,
100%. But the only thing with Notre Dame, the short game sometimes can work against Notre Dame. When we saw Texas A&M work against Notre Dame, that's really what worked, and that's what works in the Georgia Tech offense, and that's why I think this matchup actually kind of favors Georgia Tech in a way that doesn't seem, inherently obvious.
Yeah. But, Notre Dame has not done a super elite job of stopping runs between the tackles this year. Like, that's kind of where they've been gotten. And look, the offense, the past couple of games when it's come to running the football, they're up to 25th in the nation in rushing offense now, which is first in the ACC. And that's not where they were just a few weeks ago coming out of the bye. Look, they had 245 yards on Duke and then 371 on North Carolina. That still blows me away. Now, I don't think they're going to have 371, of course. Like that's not realistic to expect. But I'm interested to see what they can do. Look, Jamal Haynes is playing like the Jamal Haynes we thought we'd see at the beginning of the year. He had some injuries, was banged up, and then now he looks like one of the best running backs in the country, which we both believe he is. With this inexperienced, I won't say inexperienced, but with Benjamin Morrison now gone, I think the corners, it's definitely like these are two, Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton are two very good receivers. And that is where Georgia Tech funnels a lot of their passing offense to. Look, Singleton has 30 catches, Rutherford has 40. I think Chase Lane is the next receiver-wise. Chase Lane is next down. I think he's at 13 or 14 catches. So that's, where the production is going to come from there. Georgia Tech is now first in the nation in sacks allowed. They still have only allowed one, and that was to Duke. Chad Alexander has emerged as the number 2 back. He is averaging nearly 6 yards a carry now. He has 202 yards this season, scored his first touchdown last week after he got put on scholarship. He looked very good in that game. Obviously, if he does indeed play, I'm going to be kind of looking to see how much they use Haynes King in the running game. That's going to be something to monitor throughout the game. But yeah, I think, I'm interested to see how Notre Dame tries to match up without Morrison because he is just such a huge part, and they have some young guys back there, some talented guys that have played well. But I'll see if Buster Faulkner can draw some things up to get the secondary, which nobody's been able to do this year. Like that secondary has been very, very good all year long. But I guess, you got other thoughts on the matchup here?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to touch on. I'm not sure. I think Georgia Tech should try and push the ball down the field. What we saw against North Carolina, I'm not sure how that's going to look. Obviously, Haynes King still going to be banged up. We don't know if he's going to play or not. If he does play, I don't know if he'll be at the level to where he could push the ball downfield in this game. I think we're going to see a lot of short game. Again, that's what works so well with Texas A&M playing Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets inconsistent pressure. I will say they do get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. It's never consistent. The only guy who really is a game breaker, I think he's probably the scariest player for Georgia Tech to face defensively, is Howard Cross. He gets to the quarterback at a ridiculous rate. He has 9 tackles on the year. He has 4 sacks. You don't really see that ratio very often, but he is an absolute game breaker. So I think getting the ball out of Haynes King's hands fast is a key, and I think finding ways to get playmakers open. We say it every week, but I think Malik Rutherford is going to be key in this game, no matter what way it be, whether it be running the football, because he has done that a decent amount, or it be in the short game. I think he has emerged as probably the biggest weapon on offense outside of Jamal Haynes.
Yeah, I would agree. Like Malik has been very good. I think he should be very much in contention for all ACC honors this year. I think he's been fantastic, and he's just a guy you can use in just a number of ways. We haven't seen a lot from Eric Singleton when it comes to run the ball lately. Yeah. Like if you notice that, like they did that a lot earlier in the year. I wonder maybe if some of that gets busted out. We'll have to see. But overall, this is just going to be it's going to be a tough matchup. But I do think that there are ways that Georgia Tech can find success. You look at just some of the stats here, like they're pretty good for Notre Dame. Like obviously, defensive success rate, they're sixth. Rushing is again probably the weaker point of their defense. 46th in rushing success rate allowed. They are number one in dropback success rate allowed. Like they are a very good secondary. Now again, that was with Morrison. Like that's going to be a huge difference in this game, as we've talked about. And then you look at Tech's offensive success rate. Like their numbers are solid both ways. Like they're 26th in success rate, 60th in rushing success rate, and that's they've come up a little bit because they had some really rough games where they were not running the ball well, and they're 15th in dropback success rate. So that does lead you to suggest, or that does lead you to possibly believe they can find some holes in the Notre Dame secondary because the games that they the last game where they couldn't run the ball was against Louisville. Like Haynes King was able to find success throwing the football. Like he had over 300 yards in that game, I believe, and hit some big plays. But also, I want to get to this. Just I guess this is a transition to X factors. And number one, I don't know if it's number one, but it's up there. No mistakes. Like obviously, you might have some here or there, and I'm more meaning like the big mistakes. We talked about it in the Louisville game. After the Louisville game, I guess I should say the Haynes King turnover, like he has been very good at keeping his turnovers down. He's going to have to do it Saturday. The special teams, which we probably need to get into a little bit. We talked about it yesterday, but they're going to have to, if they are in field goal range or position, they're going to have to, execute well. The coverage has to be better this week. This is a very, 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 very good football team that you're playing Saturday. And now the margin is thinner. Like you made some critical mistakes last week in terms of, allowing that punt to be returned for a touchdown. You're missing field goals. The offense wasn't clicking until the Jamal Haynes touchdown run in the fourth quarter. Executing well and not making those mistakes is just going to be so paramount on Saturday.
Yeah, and one thing, like you say, make no mistakes. You also can't have any nothing drives. There can't be any drives this game where you're in your own territory and you go 3 and out. Like we have seen that sometimes throughout the season. It hasn't really been a problem. But against a defense like Notre Dame, you need to drive the ball early. You can't get out to a slow start. Like if you're down 14-0, you're going to have to claw back, and that's just going to be rough. Notre Dame gets the quarterback at a high level. Their coverage is always excellent. I mean, they're in man coverage most of the time. Like they believe that their guys are better, and a lot of the time it's true. That's how they beat A&M. That's how they beat Louisville. A lot of the teams in their schedule. So my keys, both of them, are really on offense. It's nothing drives, and you have to, be able to find exposures in their coverage because there will be some. It's just whether or not you take advantage because no defense is perfect, but I mean. Notre Dame's fairly close.
Yeah, like they're very good. Like their run defense is not one of the elite in the nation. They're still very good, and then they have arguably the best pass defense in the country. But now they are down their top corner, maybe the top corner of the country. So it's kind of how do you adjust from there? And that's one thing I'm looking for Notre Dame. If the injuries got to be too much to overcome against anyone. And Georgia Tech is a good team. It's one of the better teams that Notre Dame has played and will play the rest of the year. So it's like, have the injuries piled up to a point where it's not sustainable? I don't think that's the case, but I'm just kind of interested to see how how this affects them because you could even make the argument that Benjamin Morrison was their best player. Like to be honest, like him or Xavier Watts might be their best player, because outside of the running backs, they lack real game changers. At receiver, their offensive line is good, but not as good as it's been in years past. So, I'm just interested to see how that injury affects them because, again, it's a fresh one. So, definitely just a huge part of this game. But you ready to make predictions? Do you want to get anything else out there? Any other notes you had?
I'm ready to make a prediction.
All right. So, again, I've said for a little bit, I've talked about the kind of teams that give Georgia Tech trouble. They are about to start we pointed to this stretch in the season of the final 5 games being Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, and Georgia at the end of the year. This is the start of that, and it's still a formidable stretch. I still think, NC State is the one team here that I think is just not very good anymore. Like they've just not been very good at all this year. I still think, despite some losses, you can see the talent on Virginia Tech for when they play. Like, they dominated Stanford last week. They probably should have beat Miami a couple weeks ago. And then some of their losses were a bit fluky, but again, this is a Georgia Tech podcast. So this is the start of that, and I think I've said before that this is, of the 3 ranked teams that they play the rest of the way, being Notre Dame, Miami, and Georgia, this is the team that Georgia Tech matches up with the best. And I don't think it's particularly close. I don't know that Notre Dame is strong enough to – I'm wondering if they're strong enough to expose Georgia Tech's weaknesses in pass defense. And I'm wondering how their injuries are affecting them. Like the injuries they've suffered are not small. We detailed them a lot. I'm not going to go down that hole again, but I still think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a close, hard-fought game. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think both teams are going to be able to do what they want to do and what they're good at. I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win slightly. I think it's going to be 24-21. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think they're just a more talented team. But again, I can see Georgia Tech winning this game. Just don't get it wrong. I'm going to lean Notre Dame, but the good thing is I've been wrong plenty about picking games, so like that might work in Georgia Tech's favor. And I will say this about the Louisville game. I said it about the Louisville game. I picked Louisville to win that game, but I also said it scares me because that was the type of game that Georgia Tech has won in the past. Now, I know this isn't a conference foe, and Brent Key has done well against ranked conference teams. This is a ranked team that Georgia Tech is an underdog to. And again, the matchups are not super unfavorable for Georgia Tech, so I can absolutely see them win this game. But I think Notre Dame's best is just a little bit better than Georgia Tech's best. And I think the Fighting Irish get a 24-21 win is where I'm going to go.
I've wavered back and forth really on what I want my prediction to be for this game. Obviously, as a fan, it's hard to pick against Georgia Tech. Again, I also did it in the Louisville game. But this game feels a little bit different than Louisville. Louisville, obviously, we've talked about, has a really strong pass offense. Same thing with Syracuse. Notre Dame doesn't really have that explosive down-the-field pass offense. They have something, not really a lot. But then again, their rushing offense is really solid. They have multiple running backs who can go out there and run like an RB1 would. North Carolina, obviously, we saw Amari and Hampton. I don't really think they have a number 2 guy on the level of Amari and Hampton. I think Notre Dame has 2 running backs that are on the same level. I think defensively it's a nightmare matchup for Georgia Tech. I just don't see a lot of reason to pick the Jackets. Besides the offensive matchup, I think they match up well offensively. I think this Notre Dame defense matches up really well with what Georgia Tech does. I think that's probably the biggest advantage from Notre Dame. I'm going to say it's going to be close. I'm going to say it's going to be low scoring. I'm going to go similar, a little bit lower than you were. I'm going to say Georgia Tech 20, Notre Dame 23.
Okay. I was about to say you can't pick the same score. That's lame. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. But that has been our preview for this game. Look, I will be at the game Saturday in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is hopefully all of you guys are able to make it out there. But if you're not, the game will be on ESPN at 3:30. Anything else before we get out of here, RJ?
Actually, you know what? I'm going to change my prediction. Go Jackets, 23-20, Georgia Tech. Every single time I've called an upset on this podcast, no matter what it may be, even Georgia Tech, even ACC upsets, I'm undefeated right now. So I got to pick the Jackets. Give them a little bit of luck.
There you go. I should have mentioned anything else football-wise before I talk about this.
Nope.
Okay, so the ACC basketball poll was released last night, I believe. We haven't gotten into full basketball mode, but we're going to very soon. Georgia Tech was picked to finish 12th. Ndongo, he did get second team All ACC selection, which was good to see. Again, this isn't like a preview episode yet. We will have that for you. I will just go ahead and say I think Georgia Tech will finish better than 12th. I think they're going to be one of the most improved teams in the ACC. Not saying they're going to win it, but I think they're going to finish higher than 12th. Any thoughts on either of those things?
Yeah, I thought they showed enough flashes last year to be higher ranked. I think Javian McCollum is, a big pickup.
To me, it was about who they brought in.
Yeah. I think Javian McCollum is a big pickup. I think Ryan Mutombo is actually going to play a decent amount. I just feel like it's a much improved team. You have a lot of young guys who came back. I mean, I could see them being a top 5 team in the ACC, and I don't really think that's ridiculous.
We've hinted at it. To me, I think it's very justified to have Duke or North Carolina as 1 and 2. I think I definitely pick those 2 teams 1 and 2 as far as talent goes. It's kind of open the rest of the way. I think Wake Forest, because I think they were voted 3rd, if I'm remembering correctly. I think there are going to be other good teams, of course, in there, but I do think that Georgia Tech can get into the top 10. I probably won't say anything about top 5 just yet. Yeah, Wake Forest was 3rd yesterday, so it was the official poll was Duke 1, North Carolina, Wake Forest, Clemson, Virginia, Miami, Pitt, NC State, Louisville, Notre Dame, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, SMU, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Cal, Stanford, Boston College. R.J. Davis from North Carolina, he kind of ran away with the preseason Player of the Year voting. As you can all a shout out to the one person who did vote Cooper Flagg to be ACC Rookie of the Year. That is, I appreciate that. That was interesting because that would not be the way I lean. Yeah. Preseason All ACC team, first team: R.J. Davis, Cooper Flagg, Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, Nigel Pack from Miami, Hunter Salas from Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest is going to be a very good team. I totally would probably vote them 3rd, but I don't think that they're just by far and away the number 3 team. I guess if that makes sense. I do think after those top 2 teams, it's a bit open, and we'll see. I think the ACC is going to be very fun this year. But again, we'll have the full basketball preview later. But that was released last night, so I did want to touch on it before we go. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, just to reiterate what you said, any team 3 through 13 in that poll, I think is very interchangeable. I'm not saying SMU is better than Wake Forest because they're not, but a lot of those teams, I think there is going to be a lot of movement.
There's always surprises. Look at Pitt the past couple of years. Pitt especially I think it was a couple of years ago where they were picked near the back and then they finished. They were a tournament team, and they were a borderline. They should have been in the tournament last year. I remember saying that. But would you have voted Cooper Flagg as Rookie of the Year?
I mean, I'd want to be the one guy who did it just to spite.
Yeah, when I was looking through that yesterday, I was like, and it's nothing against the kid from Cal that got a vote. It was just kind of funny. You had all those votes for what some are saying is one of the best NBA draft prospects of all time and one of the most hyped recruits of all time. And he was 1 vote shy of being a unanimous Rookie of the Year. But that's going to do it for our show today. Again, the game 3:30 Saturday. Hope as many of you can come out as you can. Go follow us on social media, but more importantly, if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave us a review. That would help us a ton on podcast form as well. Leave us a review, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Just be sure to leave us a 5-star review, 1-star review, whatever you think. Just leave us a comment and just let us know what you think of the show. We will be back sometime Saturday night after the game is over to kind of break it down, kind of give our instant thoughts. And then, it's the same cycle will go on. Then, it'll be time to turn the page and start looking at Virginia Tech. But anything else before we get out of here, RJ?
Nope.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for our show today. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time.